Okay, class, today we're going to talk about volume of rectangular prisms and pyramids. And first, before we start, we're going to define what volume is. Volume is the number of cubic units needed to fill a given space. And I wrote you an example here, how volume is written. It's written with a 3 here, 525 centimeters cubed is how we say it, or we can say 525 cubic centimeters. But with area, it was square units. With volume, it's cubic units. Okay, so let's turn over on the inside. Let's get started with our first shape here. And as you see on our graphic organizer, I have a little acronym here for you to remember the steps with solving volume problems. Falling behind creates problems for students. Okay. Every underlined letter here represents each step. F is for the formula. B is for the base, the area of the base, big B. C is for the capital letters. P is for plugging in the numbers, and S is for solving. So let's first start with the volume of a rectangular prism. So I always tell you when we did surface area to locate your bases and shade your bases. So I'm going to do that right now. So this is a rectangular prism. So our bases are going to be the rectangles here. So I'm going to shade in the base here. And if I had another base, it would be here. That's the bottom as well. Okay. All right. So now my first step tells me to label the dimensions. And it gives me an example here. What I mean by the dimensions is the length, the width, or the height. That's just an example. Okay, so let's label our dimensions here. So we always know the height. The height is what's the hardest for most students to recognize because they think the height is something else. Now, the height always connects to two bases. So if you look at your two bases, whatever length is in between those two bases, that's going to be your height. That's your height of your entire figure. Okay. The base here, this would be, if it's this is our length here. This is our width. Okay. Now, the next step says to write the formula. So volume is a little unique because volume is the same formula for any figure. It just changes when it gets to a pyramid. Formula is volume equals V equals big B times H. Now, I can also write this as, I'm just going to break down what big B is. Volume equals, okay, big B is the area of the base. So my base is a rectangle. So I'm just going to substitute for big B. I'm going to put whatever that is. So it's length times width. And then times the height of the entire figure. Okay. Now, my next step is to draw and label the base. Okay. My base is shaped like a rectangle. So I'm just going to draw a rectangle here in this space. Okay. And I'm going to label it just like it is here. So this right here will be my 5 feet. And this here will be my 3 feet. Okay. So far, we've found our formula. We've labeled, we found our formula. All I did was break down what big B is. All I did was break it down. Okay, and the H, the height is the height of the entire figure. Okay, now the next step is to calculate the capital letters. Now the capital letters, that's going to be big B. So the capital letters is big B, which is the area of the base. Okay, so big B, and up here we broke it down as length times width. So big B is the length, and all we have to do is look at our previous step for this, because this is big B right here. So we do 5 times 3, which would give me 15. So big B is 15. Okay. Now my next step is to plug in the values for the variables. So I'm just gonna rewrite my formula down here. So all I'm gonna do is plug it in. So V equals, and we already have big B, so take whatever you just calculated and just bring it on down. And then times the height, which is the height of the entire figure. So that's going to be 4. Okay. All I'm doing there is just plugging it in. Now the last step is to solve. So volume equals 15 times 4, which will give me 60. So it'll be 60 feet cubed, or you can say that's 60 cubic feet. Okay. So to run back through our steps, label the dimensions. Okay. Write down our formula. I broke down big B, which is the area of the base. The next step was to draw and label the base, which is big B. So I drew my rectangle. I labeled it. The next step was to calculate the capital letters, which was big B, which is the area of the base, which was 5 times 3. Next step was to plug it in. All I did was bring that down. The volume equals big B times the height, which was 4. And then I solved 60 feet cubed. Okay. Now, the next shape is a rectangular pyramid. So here's where the formula is the same, but it has one more little thing in there. Okay. Now, first thing I'm always do is I'm going to shade in my base. Okay. All right. Label my dimensions. All right. So it's still a rectangle here at the bottom. So I'm going to label it as length. Once I get the pen working, there we go. Length and width. And the 9 is the height of my entire pyramid here. As you see, it goes right down the middle. So this is my height of the entire pyramid. All right, so now write the formula. Now, if you look at your formula chart, you see that the volume for a pyramid is a little bit different. It is V equals 1/3 of big B times H. Okay, so on pyramids, we're taking 1/3 of whatever big B times H is. Okay, now I'm going to again break down what big B is. 1/3. I'm breaking down what big B is, which would be length times width, and then times the height of the entire figure. Okay, now I'm going to draw and label my base, which is still a rectangle. I'm going to label it. Okay. Now I'm going to calculate my capital letters, which again, this is big B. Okay. So now what I want you to do is I want you to take a second. I'm going to pause, and I want you to calculate what the capital letters is. Okay, you should have gotten big B equals 10 times 5, which is going to give us 50. Okay, so big B is 50. All right, so now my next step is to plug in the variables for my formula. And if I want to, you can go ahead and write your formula here. Okay, all right, so volume equals, and I'm going to pause again, and I want you to go ahead and plug in the variables for the formula. Okay, so what you should have gotten was volume equals 1/3. Bring down whatever big B is, which was 50, times 9, which is the height of the entire figure. Okay, so now once we do that, we need to calculate so we can solve that. All right, so now 1/3 of 50 times 9. So we need to do 50 times 9. Okay, go ahead and calculate that and give me an answer. Okay, you should have gotten 450. So this is V equals 1/3 of 450. All right, so we know that what we can do is put this 450, we can do 450 divided by 3, or we can simplify it. It's the same thing. We can put this over 1 and do 450 divided by 3, which will give us the same thing. So 450 divided by 3 would give me 150. So my volume here would be 150 cubic centimeters. Okay, so now to walk us back through that, first step was to label my dimensions. Well, first step actually is to shade in our base. Then we label our dimensions. Okay, write down our formula. And if it helps you, break down whatever big B is. Big B is the area of the base. Okay. All right. Next step was to draw and label the base. I drew my base, which is a rectangle. I labeled it. Next step was to calculate the capital letters, which was big B. Big B is 10 times 5, which gives me 50. Next step is to plug in the variables in my formula. Okay, so I just brought down that 50, which was big B. So it's V equals 1/3 of 50 times 9, which would give me 1/3 of 450. All right, and we know that 450 divided by 3 would give me 150 cubic centimeters. Okay, so now we just did volume of rectangular prisms and pyramids.